So Max Child,
Yes.
thank you for being back here with NFX.
Excited.
We've been working together with you for 9 years, and you are the #1 voice games company in the world.
Yes, that's right. And maybe #1 AI games company in the world.
Okay, there you go.
Definitely voice games for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah. We're we have hundreds of thousands of subscribers. We have tens of millions of ARR, and have grown really fast in the last couple of years.
Can you tell us what you guys are doing?
Yes, run a company called Weekend. We are, dedicated to the principle that AI should be used to make people's lives more fun, more joyful. And specifically, our product is voice AI games. So games powered by speech recognition, large language models, speech synthesis. And you can play our games on essentially the biggest screen, the biggest computer you have in your home, which is your smart TV. And so we have a Weekend app. It's on Fire TV, Roku, Samsung, LG devices. Download our app, subscribe just like Netflix, and you get a bunch of games that you can play with your friends.
And are these multiplayer?
These are all multiplayer. We actually are majority multiplayer usage. So people playing, sitting on the couch next to their family members, or people who come over for a party. We have a few kind of key genres of games that are working really well. One is game shows. So we have like a Jeopardy game. If you ever watched that TV show, we make like a simulated version of Jeopardy. Sit on the couch, you see the question on the screen, you try to buzz in on your phone, beat your friends, say like, what is Sacramento? So game shows work really well. We have, Jeopardy, Wheel of Fortune, some other ones. We have kids content. I know you and I both have kids, so we make like an interactive, playable version of Coco Melon. So I have a 3-year-old. She can play peekaboo with her favorite characters and do hidden object recognition and that kind of thing. And then finally, storytelling. So interactive fiction. Big believers in this sort of like using AI to, create characters that you can talk to and go on missions and quests and things like that.
Amazing. You doing anything in music?
Yeah, of course. So we have a very popular Guess the Song game called Song Quiz, where we play pop music, try to shout out the title of the artist, as well as karaoke is one of our up-and-comer ones. So I don't know if you've ever played Rock Band, but
yeah. And so we've been on this journey with you for a while now.
Yeah.
Why did you decide to go into voice? And what devices were you on initially? And now what has it moved to?
Yeah, absolutely. So back 9 years ago when we started working together, we were just getting excited about voice. I think I can't really explain it other than my co-founder James and I were just always intuitively attracted to the idea of like talking to computers. It felt like the next big thing in terms of how we use computers. We felt like it was the thing that comes next after touching your phone. And I think we were probably wrong in 2015 or 2016, or at least we were like way too early. We're pretty successful on these smart speaker devices in the house.
From Amazon or Google.
Yeah, Amazon and Google, Alexa, things like that. We built a pretty solid games business on that platform, which is still quite profitable. But
you're the #1 voice games company in the world.
We are definitely the #1 voice games company in the world by a lot.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I think smart speakers, they're in maybe 20-25% of American households. But what we figured out a couple years ago was that the really big opportunity was being on the device that is in 100% of US households, which is television. And ultimately, we think mobile and iPad as well are very exciting. But, these TVs that everyone has, the average American spends actually like 4.5 to 5 hours a day in front of a television, which is pretty mind-blowing. And we started building these voice AI games for smart TVs initially as kind of just an experiment to see if they would work. And they really took off very quickly. And so, in 2004, we basically reoriented the whole company, started this new business, became Weekend, and have kind of just doubled down on smart TVs over the last 2 years.
Got it. So you've changed the name of the company from Volley to Weekend.
Yes.
And that's in process right now.
Yeah, we just went live last week, actually. So we're officially Weekend now.
Congrats, man.
Yes.
Congrats.
Thank you.
That's very cool.
We're we're pre-installed in every new Samsung in the US now, and we're pre-installed in every new LG TV in the US. We have large distribution deals in place with Fire and Roku TV and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's a lot of work to get on these devices. It's not just like launching on an app store.
No, it takes years for them to get to know you and trust you, and negotiations and redlining all the documents. And so how many people are in the company now?
We're about 75 people.
Got it. And how much have you raised total?
We've raised about $80 to $90 million, something like that total.
Amazing.
Yeah. Got a good, we've got very good ARR. Well into tens of millions, I guess I would say.
Yeah. And so when you look at all the gaming genres, talk to us about where you see Weekend fitting and what's happening in AI gaming in general.
Yeah, I ultimately believe that AI gaming is going to enable a whole new wave of casual experiences. And casual sounds sort of demeaning if you're not inside the gaming industry, but as you know, casual is actually the largest category in gaming. So, the story is sort of pre-iPhone, people played games on consoles and PCs, and they were what we would call like capital G gamers. And a lot of those games were hardcore, first person shooter experiences, that kind of thing. I was into a lot of this stuff myself. World of Warcraft, Call of Duty, Counter-Strike, all this kind of stuff, right? And then the iPhone came along and put a computer in everyone's pocket, and all of a sudden we realized there are all these people who didn't consider themselves gamers, but really love to play games. And you got this whole explosion in what we would call the casual gaming industry, right? So we have Candy Crush and Words with Friends and, a million different genres, bingo, so on and so forth. And so Playtika, Plarium, a lot of your companies. And that ended up actually being the biggest part of the gaming industry, because people who may not consider themselves gamers but still love to play games actually were much larger than the sort of narrower focused console and PC group. And so I think AI is going to do that again and take, gaming to a whole nother level where now you can play casual games in your home. You can play them on the largest screen in your household, on smart TV. And you're going to take those people who, play Candy Crush on their phones, and you're going to make them people who play games sitting on their couch. And, as I said earlier, average American sitting on their couch, 4 or 5 hours a day. There's a lot of time that could be taken by interactive multiplayer casual games.
Sure, and theoretically healthier and more social.
Yeah, I think ultimately more intellectually stimulating. I think there's really great opportunities for edutainment type content. Teaching your kids math, how to read. Learning things about the world in a game like Jeopardy, and ultimately just more mentally stimulating than just sort of watching the 5th straight episode of, whatever's on Netflix.
Sure. And so this, Weekend is one of the first to do this.
Yeah, definitely. We're leaning into not just voice, interfaces leveraging AI, but also, AI generated images within our games. We're letting our players create avatars with AI using, some of Google's new tools. We're using generated video to do backgrounds and sort of environments, which is fairly new in gaming. Most people historically, if they wanted to make a 3D environment, they had to go into Unity and make every little tree and rig it so it animated properly in the wind and all this kind of stuff. And now you can use video to sort of simulate 3D environments.
World builders.
Yeah, exactly. And then ultimately also just using LLMs for the characters within the games, right? So if you talk to the host in Jeopardy, he should make a joke about where you're from or your favorite food, or if you get 5 questions in a row right, there should be a little quip in there. And so just the concept of having AI agents play characters in games, I think is very obvious to a lot of people, but I still think is just a crazy big.
But it hasn't been done super well yet.
No,
there's companies like InWorld and other folks who are doing things in that area, but it's nascent still. Yeah,
it hasn't really hit yet, and I think that most people have not really talked to an AI in a natural way. A lot of people obviously have typed to them in a little chatbot, but talking to AI is kind of an awesome experience, especially if it's playing a role. If it's pretending to be, Ken Jennings or Al Trebek, or it's pretending to be a dragon in a storytelling game, or in a kid's game, if it's pretending to be your buddy from school, I just think talking to AI is just like a huge part of the future and a huge part of
And
entertainment.
what's the best experience you've had doing that so far?
Oh man, I mean, I think like it's stupid stuff, but like I've been playing our Wheel of Fortune prototypes and like just like jabbering with the host, like when they say like, "Oh, Max, like welcome to the stage," like yeah, like what brings you to Wheel of Fortune? Like how long have you been playing? Like where are you from? Like just like stupid kind of like personality quiz type stuff. Obviously, you have a history there,
Yeah, yeah.
like. Just like silly like small talk bonding type thing is like weirdly magical because you're just like, oh wow, I'm just like chatting it up with my friend.
And is this coming from a particular model that you're using, or?
Yeah, we're definitely leaning into these sort of more creative, silly, fun models. Like we've been using the OpenAI real-time model, which is an end-to-end speech model. It's actually trained on audio tokens rather than text tokens, if you want to get into the details. But it's very like emotional and fun, and it can do accents, and it can play roles, and it can really like be silly in a way that like
So the gun for this went off 9 or 12 months ago, and so we're just barely into it.
just barely into
And
it.
we're feeling our way toward what those experiences are going to be. And you guys are in the forefront of it.
I mean, we're trying to innovate, and I'm sure we're not going to get everything right, but I do think I have now experienced enough like holy shit moments with these AI models in the last like 6 to 9 months that I just feel confident it's going to work. Something is there.
It's going to be a big deal. Got it.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the founder journey.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what have you learned? What are some of the big learnings that you'd love for other founders to know?
Man, I have a lot of learnings. Probably
Because you're how old now?
I'm 37.
37. And you've got
yeah.
2 kids.
I got 2 kids.
3 and 1.5.
3 and 1.5.
Yeah. You live here in San Francisco?
I live here in San Francisco, or I live in the East Bay now. I'm sorry. I lived in San Francisco for about a decade. I moved to the East Bay, get the suburban kids lifestyle. I mean, I think like a lot of my takes on the founder journey are, I have like very obvious cliched ones, and then I have maybe less obvious ones. I think the obvious cliched ones are just like, not giving up is the most important thing. I think is something that's frequently repeated. Like, if you don't die, at some point you will have the ability to live. I mean, we tried a lot of different ideas along the way. Even this recent, discovery of a better platform to put our products on. I don't think I would have predicted LLMs would come out of nowhere, 4 or 5 years ago when we were building voice. But we're not dead, and so we get to live and take advantage of these things.
So it's interesting. It sounds to me like you grabbed a very trusted co-founder in James.
Yes.
And you guys have just been in this forever. You built a team and a culture around you. You got tech out. You got revenues. You got products out.
Yeah.
And then you kind of took advantage of whatever good luck the world gave you.
Yeah.
One was LLMs. The other was TVs.
Yes, exactly. And you don't get to take advantage if you blow yourself up.
Prior to the good luck happening.
Exactly, right.
Yeah.
Because I mean, every 10 shots on goal, right? It's sort of like venture capital, right? Like 8 will probably just be complete zeros. Like 1 will be fine, and then 1 will like change your life, right? And if you don't give yourself like 50 shots on goal as a founder, you won't find like the 5 things that end up changing your life, right? And I think to your point, finding a great co-founder, James and I have been friends for like almost 20 years now, and we just really liked what we were doing. We really like building entertainment together, and we like trying to create new things together. And you need that to survive that long, I think.
Yeah.
Also.
And so people ask the question, is it luck or skill? And really it's luck, but the skill is in staying alive.
Yeah.
So the luck has multiple times to hit you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think like we have gotten better at like our jobs over the last 10 years. But again, the reason we've had time to get better is because we haven't died, right? Because you have lived enough feedback loops where you have been smacked around by reality, or I have had that experience of being smacked around by reality that I can learn, right? I can't learn if I just burn out in a flame of glory, with 1 shot on goal. And so I think that's an important one. I would say like a sort of interesting one is just like how consumer technology has just never been cool in my entire career. like people keep pretending it is. And I think gaming, obviously you're familiar with, is its own kind of universe where there are people who understand how the world works and how the game is played and everything. But I mean, since we've been working together, has there ever been like a wave of VC investment in consumer?
No, in fact, we've done articles about this on NFX, where the consumer thing basically stopped in 2013. It was cool between 94 and 2013, and it stopped being cool.
Yeah. I still think it's not cool.
Yeah.
Maybe in these seed stages, it's becoming cool. People say they want to do consumer AI companies. I haven't seen a lot of evidence of that. Yeah. And then when people cite really successful consumer companies, it's always like a fairly bizarre contortion of what I would consider a consumer. Like there'll be like, oh yeah, like like 11 Labs is this huge consumer company, which for those
or ChatGPT.
Yeah, ChatGPT, right? And it's like, okay. I mean, that's like a 500
Starlink.
Yeah, right. Starlink, consumer. I mean, again, like to build great consumer products, maybe the lesson is you need $500 million in capex up front. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, like it's just it's never been cool, which makes it not competitive. So I think you can have more time to figure stuff out because you're not in such a knife fight all the time with other highly funded people. Yeah. But I would say it also has just been like painful to convince investors that investing in consumer was a good idea. So I'm not sure to recommend.
Well, and also the people getting recruited and the talent, they're going to think, well, B2B is cooler now.
Yeah. I mean, it is actually valuable on that dimension in some ways, because there's this sort of, missionary mercenary dilemma or whatever. And the cool companies in Silicon Valley, which are not cool for normal people, but are cool in Silicon Valley, will always be these sort of ultra highly funded, B2B infrastructure companies or whatever, and the person who's the mercenary or who's kind of status seeking in Silicon Valley will probably be drawn to whoever Sequoia funded 2 weeks ago, and that will not be a consumer company, I guarantee. And so ultimately you do kind of end up with more missionary team, because you have to draw from people who want to build stuff that makes people's lives more joyful and more fun. And so you end up hiring a more committed, I think, group of people to the product itself and to the mission of bringing joy to people.
Yeah. Have there been some people who've been with you for all these years?
A couple. Yeah. It's pretty crazy. Yeah. A couple. I mean, it's just sort of we got lucky very early with a couple. Definitely made a lot of mistakes along the way. But yeah, a few. Yeah.
What is a person or something somebody said that really changed your life?
I mean, honestly, relevant, top of mind because I'm here. I think a lot of the NFX lessons were really valuable around speed, I think, being the sort of quintessential NFX lesson, the virtue of speed trumping all else. I think, again, in sort of that shots on goal framework, surviving long enough to give yourself luck. Another way to do it is just to take a lot of shots on goal, and doing that quickly, I think, helps a lot. So moving really fast has ultimately been incredibly valuable. I don't know if I can't really think if anyone said this to me or if this was part of NFX, but I'm always sort of amazed how few people, especially in the earlier stages of their startup, have no growth strategy. And I think that I had no growth strategy. So I can empathize with this experience of thinking that you could make a product and tweet it out or put it on LinkedIn and people would sign up for it, or that there would be some way to discover users by getting in the news or something like that, And I think actually this was I don't know if you remember Reforge, I did the Reforge class. Actually, it was really insightful on that front. And they basically said in Reforge, there are only 3 actual growth strategies in existence, basically. And it was virality is one, which, K factor, right?
So get your users to get you more new users for free.
Get your users to get you more new users for free, which is incredibly fucking hard. Almost has been done maybe successfully.
There was a lot of very viral companies between 94 and 2012.
Yes.
And that's what gave rise to so many, decacorns plus in the consumer area.
Yeah.
But then it ended.
Yeah. Because the channels dried up or everybody forgot how it worked.
The channels consolidated to Google and Facebook and they just started paying tolls.
Yeah. Okay, so virality now kind of impossible. Occasionally there's an anonymous polling app made by Nikita Beer or whatever, but it lasts like 6 weeks.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Right. So virality is like really hard. I'm not, for the record, I'm not dismissing the importance of virality because I think virality is like incredibly important. It's probably somewhat underrated now because it's so rarely been successful over the last 15 years. But so that's one, virality. Number two, they said was sort of what they would call SEO. So not necessarily specifically Google SEO, but the idea of getting enough content out in the universe that it's indexed by some sort of search mechanism, right? And then you get discovered that way.
Yeah, but it's just that Google is 90% of it, so it is Google.
Google's 90% of it, but it did, to come back to the Alexa point, it's kind of how we succeeded on Alexa because we launched lots and lots of different titles and we figured out what people were asking for on Alexa, which was another form of search. And we ended up, we didn't build $1 billion business on Alexa, but we built, a tens of millions of dollars of business on Alexa. And so that actually was fairly insightful, the sort of SEO one.
And also App Store rankings as well.
Yeah, ASO, I was going to say, is another variation of, SEO. Maybe these days we're going to have ChatGPT, EO, whatever people are calling it.
Right.
That actually is pretty interesting, right? Thinking about what, chatbot SEO looks like. And I'm sure a lot of people are thinking about that.
A lot of people are working on that.
Yeah, right. So there are probably like huge pipelines of traffic that are turning right now. So that's super interesting. So you have virality, SEO, and then finally paid, essentially they called it, right? So in consumer, that would be marketing. So paying to be in front of people, for us, like, getting installed in every new Samsung TV, right? And then in B2B, paid is just sales basically, right? Or, like
sales teams, people getting on planes.
Yeah. Right. You pay people.
Yeah.
They go sell your product.
Right.
That's paid acquisition.
Right.
We would call it paid acquisition in gaming, but sales is just paid acquisition. And that's kind of it. Like, I mean,
that's right.
Almost every form of growth distills into one of those three categories at sort of a fundamental level. Sure. And you have to have retention to make any of those work. Otherwise you don't have a sustainable business. But that framework was really stuck with me. I mean, obviously I'm like quoting it like 8 years later or something. And I think before I understood that, I was really flying pretty blind on how to grow the company. And after that, I was like, oh, I get it. Like, I have to figure out one of these three things, or ideally more than one. You can layer on over time. But I don't know. I found that to be a really salient learning early in the startup.
Perfect. Yeah. No, growth is so much, and they say that the first time founders focus on product, and the second time founders focus on distribution or growth, if you will. So let's see. Today's Friday. On Sunday, we are having the NFX AI Games Summit, and you're speaking there.
Yes.
And we've got about 100 people, 120 people who have been admitted to come out of hundreds that have applied.
Nice.
And we're going to get together and we're going to talk about the state of where things are with AI.
Yeah.
And and what new experiences can be created with AI that aren't yet out in the market. So that there can be big new gaming companies built.
Yeah.
And so there's two things going on with AI, if we will, bucket it into using AI to make your business more effective. So operations, testing, all that stuff using AI.
The cost side.
The cost side.
Or the production side.
The production side, yeah. And then there's the experience side. Mm-hmm. Like, what new experiences can we create? Mm-hmm. And how are you guys doing on the operations side with AI at this point?
We're doing a lot. I mean, I think that obviously there's sort of the basic lowest tier of AI, optimization or speed, and that would just be using Claude Code for everything, right? Essentially having Claude Code write the majority of your code. We are already there basically, and I would say engineering productivity has probably 2 to 2.5x in the last year and rising, right? And so, the cost side or the quality of the output in the same time frame with the same number of people has gone up probably 2 to 2.5x.
That's a great estimate. Yeah. And I remember 2.5 years ago, 2 years ago, people were estimating they were getting about 30 to 40% productivity improvement.
Yeah.
And now you're saying it's actually 2 to 2.5.
I would say 2 to 2.5x if you're fully Claude Code pilled.
Yeah, awesome.
You obviously need people who are adopting it as well, and you probably want to not work with people who don't want to adopt AI coding at this point because it's sort of becoming a bit of a Luddite view. So that's like the most basic and obvious take, and I think anyone who's not adopting that is pretty far behind. But the other piece of the production side, I think, for gaming is really on well, there's, I guess, two more things I would talk about. One is like prototyping and user testing, and the other one is the sort of art pipeline and the sort of creation of visual assets, right? And so prototyping and user testing is a really interesting one because essentially all of our product managers can now build features. Now, can they build like production level, go out to all the users features? No, but that'll probably be like 6 months from now with like the next version of Claude. But the amazing thing is when your product managers can build features, they can Claude code a feature in a few hours, and then they can go run a user test or a play test with it, or even just show it to their buddy next to them at the desk, and like you get such better feedback like with a real feature. I mean,
and waving your hands and talking.
Yeah, or looking at a Notion doc and being like, oh yeah, that sounds cool, or great. I mean, we used to talk about like paper prototyping in gaming being like the state of the art of like pre-development testing, right? And that literally means like showing people pieces of paper, and then they press a pretend button on the paper, and then the next page comes up because someone pulls out a new piece of paper. So we have like that, but 100x is good because we're prototyping features. And so I just think that's like, I can't really measure what the outcomes of that are, but
So the speed of creativity
is crazy,
and the
high.
testing of new ideas is just
Much higher.
10x.
And so you're just getting much, much better features because you're not going down like blind alleys, right? You're pretty much making sure that your features like don't suck before you start really building them.
Yeah. Back in 22, when we first saw this AI coming, we coined this term, which was more and better. We're going to go into a 10-year more and better phase. And we're now 3 years in. And what you're describing is more features, more code, better code. It's just more and better right now.
Yeah. We're using Google's video generation tool, VO, to animate scenes that you can like be a part of, that you can walk through. We're using Nano Banana is the name of their image generation tool, but to create the look of like objects in the scene, avatars, things like that. And then, ultimately we're using video also to sort of create sort of fake 3D characters. Like to make 3D characters in gaming, traditionally, you have to build them in Unity and then do with rigging and a bunch of other sort of painful stuff. But now you can essentially use video to create like a 3D looking character without going through all the work of like rigging them and building them in a 3D engine, which I think is like a really interesting hack on 3D gaming going forward. So all that stuff, I don't know, is pretty exciting.
That sounds amazing on the operational side. And then on the experience side, how have things changed?
Yeah, I mean, we've spoken about a fair amount of this, but like ultimately our games are powered by talking, right? And so our games are powered by this voice AI stack. So taking people's speech in, parsing it through LLMs, and then, synthesizing an output and synthesizing both audio and visual outputs. And so fundamentally, like, our user experience is a conversation rather than the history of gaming being more about like button presses.
Fast twitch.
Yeah, or, running through an FPS or whatever. So I think there's this whole genre of games that are simulations of conversations, like that, many of which we haven't built yet, but I'm very excited about, like, building like a dating simulation where you're like trying to win The Bachelor, or a true crime like investigative simulation where you're trying to solve a murder, right? And we've, as I said, built game shows, kids, and storytelling to date, but I think there's just like quite a lot of interactive entertainment that can be framed around the mechanism of a conversation in like a fundamental way. And so I think that'll be pretty life-changing for players in general.
Got it. And so what's the long-term future for Weekend?
Yeah. I mean, our goal is basically to be, I don't know, we like to say like Roblox on your TV. So we want to be the homepage for all these different genres of AI games on your television. We have built a number of them ourselves, obviously, but ultimately our goals with our platform that runs across all these different smart TV devices is to make it, buildable and playable on top of. So we can support, user-generated games. We can support second party, third party studios building on top of that. And ultimately, yeah, we want to be, this sort of AI Roblox on these devices.
Got it. So have you turned out these creator tools to people yet or no?
They're mostly internal today, but we are working with like second party studios to sort of like, harden up the SDK and the APIs. And so it's not like open season yet.
Yeah, but sometime later in 26.
Yeah, that's the goal. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And then eventually take the company public and then start acquiring other gaming companies.
I mean, sure, that sounds like a good dream. I mean, I think we definitely want to get big enough to go public. I mean, our goal would be, one stat I always cite is there's actually like 25 different TV apps that make over $1 billion a year. So like streaming services, so it's a very large market. There's 25 different $1 billion a year streaming services. And so, if we were the 26th biggest or whatever, at $1 billion ARR, that's definitely a public level of revenue. Yeah. And so, I guess our midterm goal is to be, the 26th largest streaming service.
That's amazing. That's great. That is great. And you and James will do it together.
I mean, yeah, that's the plan.
That's awesome.
Yeah, still having fun.
Well, Max, it is a real pleasure to see you, my friend. And
pleasure to see
you on Sunday at the AI Game Summit. And congrats on all your progress.
Thank you, man. It's been great.